Tonight our studies of 1 Timothy continue. We're in the 3rd chapter. Paul has given instructions regarding the glory of the gospel, and then what we who have received the gospel are to do in community with one another. In chapter 2, it was instructions about how men everywhere ought to live a sanctified life and pray to God for all men. Women were given instruction regarding domestic things and modesty in their appearance and the way they conduct themselves in the world. Then in chapter 3, we turn to the noble office of elders, and it was a noble work a man desired to do if he desired to be that overseer, that elder in the church. And then tonight, down in verse 8 of chapter 3, we find there's instructions also to deacons. There's instructions that say deacons likewise. So in the same way, there were instructions given in the church to the elders. Now we're going to find instructions given to the deacons. And so let's begin to read as we have this other church office, 1 Timothy 3, verse 8. Deacons likewise must be men of dignity, not double-tongued, or addicted to much wine, or fond of sordid gain, but holding fast the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience. These men must also first be tested. Then let them serve as deacons, if they are above reproach. Women must likewise be dignified, not malicious gossips, but temperate, faithful in all things. Deacons must be husbands of only one wife, and good managers of their children and of their household. For those who have served well as deacons obtain for themselves a high standing and great confidence in the faith that is in Christ Jesus. And so with that, we'll take it in 4 parts. We'll talk about the working position that is being a deacon. We have the qualifications beginning in verse 8, going down to verse 12. But we noted an aside that says women likewise. So as we have deacons likewise, we'll in verse 11 turn to women likewise before concluding with deacons. And then we'll note there's a blessing for those who do this work. So first off, we want to think and recall that being a deacon is not an honorary position, just as elders are not an honorary position. We don't give a man who's been here a long time and gotten old the office of an elder just because he's been here for a while. And if he's a decent young fella, we don't make him a deacon as a point of honoring him. It is an honor and a crown to men who wear these titles of elder and deacon. They are noble titles, but they're not ceremonial titles. They're earned titles. They're not a thing given as a reward. These are both things that are actual responsibilities. And so just as the elder's job told us what he'd be doing and what kind of man we needed, right? He's an elder, so he's an experienced man. He's an overseer, so he'll be making decisions. We need a man who can make good decisions. And we needed shepherds or pastors, one who could feed the flock, look to the needs of the flock, maybe like the shepherds of old, spend the night in the field with the flock, search for the lost from the flock, etc. So a deacon, his title tells us his role. It is the word diakonos. And the word quite literally means a servant. Now, I'm not much on etymologies of Greek words. I like them a lot from English words, but I don't know a lot about Greek to know etymologies, but it has been noted by others who know much more about this than I. They say that diakonos is a compound word. First, the dia, which is a preposition, oftentimes if it stands by itself, which means through, and then konos is the idea of a dust cloud or raising up dust. And so quite literally, the roots of the word diakonos mean one who's coming through the dust, one who's raising up a cloud of dust, one who's a worker. He's not Pigpen. It's not a cloud of filth that surrounds him, but there's a flurry of activity around the good servant, around the good deacon. Some English equivalents to this word that we might use in place of the word deacon might be servant, might also be minister. It might also be waiter. It might be attendant. And so someone who's a good attendant, somebody who's a waiter. Of course, in Acts 6, they're not called deacons, but the men there were in charge of the daily distribution of food. Of course, there was an oversight of that distribution, not just of the last step of taking it from the bakery to the people, but possibly procuring it and funds oversight, and or maybe setting it up that various sisters would do cooking and baking and the like. So that was a job that had oversight in it, that had fiscal responsibility in it, that had great responsibility in it, that had regular attendance to things as a part of it. And so what we find in all is that deacons are trusted servants. That really is the task of a deacon, to be a trusted servant. Somebody, as the text said, a man would be tested first. Well, how do we know he's a trusted servant? Well, we've set him some tasks. He's done those tasks. He's performed them well. And so we can have a reasonable assurance that this man will get the job done. So he's, as we might say, a proven hand. And so he's pre-positioned to do good works. He's on the pre-approved list of somebody we can automatically count on. Now, because of this, the deacon is basically just servant. It's, again, in scriptural use as an office, one of a trusted and pre-positioned, pre-approved servant. We see that sometimes just the work itself is called the work of service, the work of a deacon. And so we might have people who do works like a deacon, but they might not have such the official office of a deacon. There gets to be a lot of ink spilled when we come to Romans 16:1, because there's a sister Phoebe there to whom Paul gives the highest level possible of commendation. He says she's a servant of the church in Cenchrea. Because she is such a good servant of the church, she's to be received in the Lord in a manner worthy of the saints. She is to be helped in whatever she may have need of. She has been a helper of many and of myself. So here was a lady who was a helper of the church, a servant, and Paul says to the church there, y'all help her out. What if she's doing it? Just help her out. What she's doing is good stuff. And so we can trust her. And actually, in every way, that is what a deacon is. This sister is doing everything that a deacon does. So I think we can have the work of the ministry of deacons without the actual office, because the qualifications of the office here in verse 8 are first men of dignity, and then it tells us something about their wives. And so it doesn't seem to me that we have an official office of deaconess, but certainly we might have women of such long-standing service, of wisdom in the things that they do, that somebody could give some advice to somebody. Look, if that lady's doing it, you help her out. If that lady's doing it, try to take part. I think we could give that recommendation to women today, even if we don't have, as some have set up, an office or official list of deaconesses. And it wasn't just that one woman. She was exceptional for sure, but it wasn't just her alone. In Romans 16 again, in verse 12, greet, it says, Tryphania and Trophasia. Don't know anything about those except those are lady names. Those are feminine names. And it says they are workers. And that worker there is the same word as deacon. They are servants. They're workers. They're people doing the work in the Lord. Then it says after that, another fella, greet Perseus, the beloved, who has worked hard in the Lord. And so in Romans 16:12, There are two that are commended for the work they're doing. They're ladies. There's one who is commended for the work he's done. So, I don't know, maybe he's had gotten older or in bad health and was no longer quite so active, but still to be honored. Or maybe it's not talking about what he had done, that he's no longer being able to do it, but that in the past he had been especially notable. But in any case, that they were workers in the Lord is the same. It's the verb form of deacon. So we have the office of deacon. We also have people doing the work of service, the work of ministry, the work of attendance, the work of carrying things out. Colossians 1:7, there's Epaphras, who was a faithful servant of Christ on behalf of the church. He'd ministered to Paul in their name. Doesn't seem that he's officially a deacon, but still, he'd served. He'd been a faithful servant. Philemon is told about Onesimus, who had before been such a poor servant, a poor slave of Philemon. But Paul said of him, Philemon, in verse 13, that I wish to keep him with me so that he might minister. There's that word that is deacon is based on, that he might minister to me in my imprisonment. And so Paul says, I'd love for him to work or deacon or serve with me. So it's a broader word, this word servant or deacon, often also minister. Whenever you see, like in 2 Corinthians, that Paul talks about the ministry of the word, or that they were ministers of the gospel, it's that same thing. It's the same root as deacon. It all comes from the same word. So in all these texts, we have the work being done. And most of the time, we're talking about the work and the workers, but occasionally we have, like here, we have an office of this. So in Philippians 1 and verse 1, when Paul and Timothy, the bondservants of Christ, wrote to the saints who were in Philippi, it says, we send you greetings, including, it says, the overseers and the deacons. So there is an office of deacon, as well as there is the work that's being done. So sometimes there's a question. People are like, well, can we have deacons without elders? Because we don't have men who are qualified to serve as elders, but we certainly have men who are qualified here to work as deacons. And so can they be in the office of deacons? I'm not sure that they can. When we do see them, they are with elders, but certainly we can have the people doing the work of deacons. And constantly we have people doing deacon-type work, even if they're not officially appointed to the office. Every time it is that our congregation decides anything, and we ask people, would you do this? Would you do that? That's the kind of work that is for a deacon. And so we need to have a new piece of equipment bought, or an old piece of equipment serviced. Well, who's going to do that? Well, we assign somebody the task. We have a repair that needs to be made, or we have some maintenance that needs to be done. Somebody's assigned with that task. And then they'll come back and report to the church, well, this is what we did. This is how we did it. And maybe these were the expenses involved. That's exactly what deacons are and what deacons do. And sometimes there is officially one in the office of it, and sometimes it's on an ad hoc basis. All right, who wants to do this? And for every congregation that's ever had a problem with trying to get volunteers or competent people to look after a thing, this is where you need the deacons. Well, the deacons in their office are a pre-approved, they're pre-selected, they're already proven. It's a board of people, a group of people who are ready to do the task, whatever that task may be. Speaking of that, I have one time heard someone say, and I'd heard that people sometimes used to think this, but then I ran into a person who actually said it to my face. They were talking about elders and deacons, and they said, well, the elders, they oversee the spiritual things, and the deacons, they oversee the physical things of the church. It's like, no, that's not right. The elders oversee all aspects of the church's work. That doesn't mean they do all aspects of the church's work, because there's a work of service for everybody. The deacons are the ones who are put in to implement the decisions whatever the overseers, the administrators, that's the elders, whatever they decide we're going to do as a church, the deacons are the ones who are appointed to implement that thing. And so that might be a physical thing, that might be a financial thing, that might be a spiritual thing. There are deacons who have been in charge of overseeing the Bible class program, making sure we have teachers for the classes, seeing what curriculum is being taught and the like. Of that, they do it under the elders, but that's a very spiritual work. There are deacons who sometimes have been given the task of deciding who it will be, who conducts which parts of the worship. So assigning the worship, including sometimes the short form speakers, deciding those things. Sometimes that's an elder that takes that task. Sometimes that's a deacon that's assigned. But the deacon is the one appointed to carry out and implement whatever such things as the elders say, this is what we're going to do. They are in many ways the appointed hands and feet, eyes and ears of the eldership and of the church to help put things in. Of course, elders might also be doing some of those very same things. You might have an elder overseeing, as the elders decided. The elder says, I'll take that under my personal oversight. I'll implement that directly. And so then he would work with the other elders, although he's doing most of the implementation. And another job, just as important, or maybe even more important, might have been handed to a deacon. So our deacons are our working men, pre-selected, known to be trustworthy, people who we can put in charge of this thing, and we can have some relatively good confidence that this thing will get done. It's also then, it's not a stepping stone to the eldership. It's not that, hey, this man was a good deacon, let's promote him. Well, no. It's a different job with different qualifications, although a proven deacon, once he has matured a little more and had some more age on him, once he's implemented things well, he might be a great candidate for being an elder. So it's not as though they're not connected, but it's also not a natural path of promotion. There are different tasks. They have different responsibilities. They have overlapping qualifications, because in both cases, we need men who are sound in the faith. In both cases, we need men who are trustworthy. But we'll note that the list for deacons is quite a bit shorter. And also, since it's not a requirement of him having believing children, it's a list of things that a man might accomplish quite a bit younger in life. So here's our qualifications. Verse 8. Deacons likewise must be men of dignity, not double-tongued. So again, they are men who the old King James would say grave, but they are men who can be serious. They're going to have jobs working with people. They're going to have jobs putting things into practice. They're going to have jobs that will have responsibility. They're going to be leaders and encouragers in many things. They might quite well be teachers. And so here they need to be dignified people, and they need to not be double-tongued. You need to be able to trust them. So, men of dignity, men of truth. Just like the elder, not addicted to much wine. So everything we said last week applies here. And so whether you take this in the most serious stage as to be prohibitive of any use, or whether it's only prohibitive of the overuse and abuse, you take that as you wish, and as we had last week, but that is exactly the same thing as elders were told, and not fond of sordid gain. And so they don't want to get an advantage financially. They're not there to privilege themselves in the financial things that they might do. And so quite often I've known where it's deacons who keep the treasury. And well, we definitely need a man who is not a greedy man in the treasury. Remember, that we can make a mistake on that, and we can have people fool us. Even among the apostles, who was it that kept the money bag? Well, it was Judas. And so I sometimes think maybe the treasurer It should be a guy like I think about our presidential candidates. Anybody who wants the job of president so bad to run for it should automatically be disqualified. So maybe in the same way, anybody who really wants to be the church treasurer, we shouldn't let him do it. Because why do you want to be the treasurer so bad? Why do you want to be the guy who writes the checks? Actually, I've not been to a place where there's a lot of people ever wanted to be the treasurer. It is a grave responsibility. It is a thankless task. It requires a great deal of precision and numbers and keeping on top of things, which just absolutely have to be done. If things get out of sorts at all, there are massive problems in it. But a deacon might well be the trusted servant who is sent to keep the books, to make the deposits, to make the payments. And you think about in the ancient church, the ones who would give in charity, the one who might be in charge of the oversight of actual distribution. The elders might decide we're going to help these people. And well, then who's sent with the bag to help these people? The deacons are. We'll have more later in this letter about a permanent charity, a list of people who are given help, some particular widows. And so there's a great deal of responsibility there, because if you don't take care of these needed charity cases, they're going to suffer. If you decide to pilfer from the box, well, who would know? Well, God would know and you would know. But this instruction about sordid gain is one that applies then and now. All right, then, here is in verse 9, the instruction in regard to the faith. They hold the mystery of the faith with a clear conscience. Now, when it says mystery of the faith, we're going to pause on any long discussion about mystery of the faith, because down in verse 16, when it tells us by common confession, great is the mystery of godliness, and then describes the work of Christ in 6 poetic lines, we're going to have quite a bit of discussion of the mystery of the faith and why it's styled a mystery. But just know that it is for now. Next week will be another teaching, not this one, but 2 weeks hence, Lord willing, we'll get to the mystery of the faith. Know that we'll also be in Ephesians quite a bit for that. So, of the faith, of the gospel, the deacon has to hold it sincerely. So he has to be a sincere believer, and he has to have some understanding of it. But this is one of the places where, aside from the abbreviation of the list, from the elder to the deacon, there is a clear distinction. The elder was one who would be able to teach. The deacon does not necessarily have to be a teacher. Now, that said, separating a good deacon who's naturally a teacher from the teaching role would certainly be underutilizing a talented man that God has in our congregation for us. And so there is no natural separation of the role of a deacon as a trusted servant from being one who, if he's able to teach, that he could teach. He's never disqualified from teaching because he's a deacon. But at the same time, he might well be a great deacon who takes care of any number of tasks wonderfully for us, trustworthily, quietly, effectively, efficiently. But the guy's not a teacher. That guy is a good deacon too. So, the minimum requirement of this regarding deacons is that they believe it. They have an understanding and belief in the things of the faith. Now, if they can teach it too, great. And at that regard, we might be well on to finding a man who'll be a preacher one day or an elder one day. And many who are in gospel ministry full time or in eldership were capable teachers when they served as deacons. But it's not required. So there's no teaching requirement of deacons. But if that's a good place for him to serve, we should definitely let him serve. Then verse 10, it says, he should be tested. Now, this is something different again from elders. Elders were not to be new converts, not people who had recently joined us. A deacon might well have much more recently joined us. It's not that he is so proven that he can refute the gainsayer that he has all of the great qualities that an elder is to have, but he is to be tested. And so a deacon is a place where there would be, it seems, a trial run. All right, you want to be a deacon around here? You want to be on the list of pre-approved servants? You want that office and recognized as a man who is a capable implementer and man of service before us? All right, let's give you some task. And so give the man some task and see how he does. Give the man some tasks and see how it turns out. And so if he can carry out these tasks and he meets these other qualities, then there's a deacon for you. And so, again, this deacon is this pre-approved servant because he's passed the test. We know we can turn to him for things of service because he has acted with faith. So let them be tested. So if they do this with beyond reproach, if there's no complaint about how they did it, if there's nothing blameworthy in what they have done, they haven't hindered the work, they haven't left the work, they haven't let it slide, then all right. So then we might have our deacon. In this regard, I think about a man who one time did fail a test, but later was useful still. So it's not that if he failed, oh man, we tried him out when he was 28 and he wasn't very good. Well, yeah, but the guy's 43 now. Come on, give him a chance. But in the book of Acts, in chapter 13, John, who's called Mark, he went with Paul on a missionary journey and he turned back. That's what the text says. And in Acts 15, Paul said, hey, he deserted us. We're not taking him again. And Barnabas said, yeah, but he's changed. I'm going to take him. And they had a bit of an argument about that, and they ended up splitting up. But later, of course, at the end, Paul in 2 Timothy, he'll write, bring John Mark. He's useful for service. And so just because a man failed the first test doesn't mean at some point later he might not be tested again. But we need men who have been tested that can be those as pre-approved and taken, just without question that they'll do their task. Again, if they do this, if they are beyond reproach. This beyond reproach, the one that you can't make a complaint about in a way that actually sticks, not that anybody couldn't make a charge, but nobody could credibly do that. That is the same type of thing we find with preachers, that we are to preach and keep the commandment without stain or reproach. That's 1 Timothy 6. All the saints are to be to grow, to be confirmed and blameless in the day of the Lord. That's 1 Corinthians 1:8. Also, we'll later get to the widows, the ones who are following the instruction of the Scripture. It says this is so they would be above reproach. And so don't think of above reproach as some super special Christian, but as Christians ought to truly be. Well, with that then, we've had most of what is said about a deacon. Only the family qualification remains. But before the family qualification is addressed, we have the address to women. Women likewise. So just as it said deacons likewise, now it says women likewise. Women likewise must be dignified, not malicious gossips, but temperate and faithful in all things. Well, what women? Well, we know that in Greek, the word wife and the word woman were the same. Sometimes we see remnants of that language, although the feminists really hate it, and English is mostly purged it from our vocabulary. But if someone would talk about my woman, meaning my wife, well, that was never the most common way in English to do it, but it was done, and it was well understood. Well, in Greek, that was the way things were done. And so a woman had her man, and a man had his woman. And of course, you would tell contextually, are we talking about husbands and wives or something else? Or Jesus in John 2, he addresses his mother as woman. And so by context, you tell what women are we talking about? All women everywhere, all the time, some set of women, some wives, some mothers, some what? Well, in this context, these women would be most obviously the deacons' wives. Now it begs the question, brings it up, brings out the question, why didn't we have anything about elders' wives? Why would the lesser office have instruction about the wives, but the women of the elders had no instruction? I think it's economy of words is my best guess. That certainly if the deacons' wives must be this way, so must and all the more must the elders' wives be this way. But other than that, I don't know. But we do have instruction regarding deacons' wives, and I do think these would apply to elders' wives as well. So what kind of wives? What kind of women do these men have? Well, they have dignified women. Again, they're dignified people. They have dignified wives. Not frivolous, not flighty, not those who are fighting, not those who are pugnacious. Now, women and men are pugnacious in different ways. Women quarrel and squabble in a different way than men do. Men are often much more direct about it, and often it's backed up by a fist. Women do it with cattiness. Women do it with gossip, which is, well, that brings up the next thing, malicious gossip. So malicious gossip is the female equivalent to a man's curled up fist. And so the women here of the deacons, their wives, they cannot be malicious gossips. Their husbands will have a position in the church. They might know things because of the position of the church. They might be looked up to because of their position in the church. And if they are unable to get along peaceably with others, if they can't control their tongue, if they are those who like way too much to talk about things that they ought not, why then the man is disqualified. Because we see that in the church with the elders and the deacons, both the house, the whole family ends up getting involved in the Christian exercise. It's not just a Lone Ranger Christian when they're fully functioning. It is first a family, and then it is a congregational interaction. So these women must then be temperate instead. King James, sober. That idea of a well-balanced person, calm and under control as ought to be, and faithful in all things. So the wives must be faithful people. Again, that is largely what the deacon is to be. He's to be a faithful and trusted person. That'd be our best summary of it. Then the other things are just details that go with that. So then back to the deacon's qualification, and we're on the domestic things with the wives. And so he must be the husband of one wife. Again, that's why I think we don't have a deaconess office. We might certainly have women who are deaconesses. We have women who are servants, women who are ministers, just exhaustive vocabulary with synonyms as you like. And using the word deaconess is a scriptural and proper way to do it. But again, that's the work of deacons, the work of ministering, not the place in the office. And so the deacon must be the one who has the office, that pre-approved, pre-appointed guy, not just by reputation, but by the scriptural qualifications. He has one wife. And then with his one wife, he and they are good managers of the children. So their children are, as Christian children, the children in Christian homes ought to be, that they have good management. They have good oversight of them. They're raising them in the discipline and admonition of the Lord. Again, this is one of the real distinctions between deacon and elder. An elder, his children are believers. He has brought children to faith. This man is in the process of doing that, but he might not well have done that yet. So a man might be appointed a deacon when his children are very, very young. And so he might have quite a while of good service in this office before he would even be qualified to, or even be considered to be an elder. So his house, with his wife and his children in it, they are well managed. They have a fine and lovely Christian home. Now, for those who do this, there's a great blessing. Here's the blessing, verse 13. For those who have served well as deacons, attain for themselves a high standing and great confidence that's in the faith that is in Jesus Christ. So they have a high standing in the things of the faith. They have a good name. They have a good reputation. People will know who they are for their good service. As it says in the Proverbs, a good name is more desired than great riches. Favor is better than silver and gold. Or Ecclesiastes 7. A good name is better than ointment. And so a man who serves well is a deacon. On that basis, as one who is a trusted servant of the church over time, he should be honored. He should be esteemed. This would be a man who's grown in confidence because of the effectiveness of his service over the interest he has shown and the time he has spent in helping other people in the things of the faith, helping implement the things of the faith, bringing others to faith and strengthening their faith, helping people in the times where they need help from the church, engage in the programs that build the church up. This man would have confidence and he would have a good name. So with this, we have elders and deacons now, well-qualified men who are in a place of the service that God has provided. These are qualities and offices that men should strive to obtain. These are things that we should seek after. We talked last week about why more people weren't qualified for the eldership. And part of it is men have not lived over the years in a way that builds these characteristics in their lives. Of course, sometimes it's their family that is the disqualifying thing. But these are set of lofty goals. But obviously, as we see them in the church, they are reachable goals. And these are things that men, especially younger men, as they would look to have a family or in their families, direct themselves and their wives and children toward these ends, that we would hope to have an overabundance of people like this, a large talent pool from which to choose our elders and our deacons from. But of course, we know in many places that is not the case. And there is a lack of men who can honestly meet these qualities, even if we don't use them, as we talked about last time. Even if we don't use this as a list to just try to disqualify people. Oh, nope, he doesn't quite live up to that. And we do it in a harsh and censorious way. But it is also true that there are those who do not meet these qualifications. They can still be fine Christians. They can still be active and helpful members of the church. But if it's a thing where you couldn't do that at all, you couldn't meet at a certain right time of age of life, if you couldn't meet these qualifications, something is wrong. Something is lacking. And so let's use these as encouragements for us, as things to go for and ways in which we can serve God.